Hey guys, welcome back. Hope you're all doing well. So today's video is going to be a follow-up to a video that I made at this time last year called My Channel Goals or something like that. I can't remember the exact title, but it was something about my YouTube channel goals. And one of the biggest goals I had for this year was to limit my high-end palette purchases. So I was sort of going on like a high-end palette low buy, and I had limited myself to one or no more than one high-end palette per month. And the reason that I decided to do that was because at the time I was purchasing every single high-end palette that came out to review on my channel, but most of the time I didn't get to them and they just kind of sat around and it was a lot of money being wasted. So I didn't limit myself as far as drugstore palettes went, but for the high end I definitely didn't want to be spending all that money on a palette only to never use it. So I wanted to focus on palettes that really spoke to me and I felt like I would use even after I did the review on YouTube. So I'm very interested to see if I actually met this goal, and I really wasn't keeping track of them too much over the course of the year. Like, I knew that I was kind of tightening the reins a little bit, but I wasn't like writing things down or keeping track of my purchases. So I did have to go back now at the end of the year and go through my Sephora and Ulta purchase histories and see exactly what I bought. So this was really a surprise to me because I had no idea what the actual number was going to be. So let's go ahead and start out with, I just broke it down by month. So in January and February of 2019, I did not buy any high-end palettes. So I started out the year doing really well. But then in March, I ended up buying 3 palettes. But at the same time, I was still on track because since I didn't buy one in January or February, basically those kind of counted one per month. So the first one I bought in March was the Anastasia Riviera palette. And this one I was very excited about because at the time, these brushes always fall out every time I open them, but at the time I was very excited about this because I was sort of an Anastasia palette collector. And as you'll see throughout the year, I kind of stopped doing that. But looking back, this was definitely a YouTube channel purchase rather than something that I felt like I was going to get a lot of use or enjoyment out of, because I normally don't wear these bright colors. And I did actually do a video on this where I did a couple of looks that came out really nice. So I did end up using it a little bit, but after that initial kind of novelty of this palette wore off, I really didn't reach for it again. So it's definitely something that I regret buying just because I really don't reach for it that much. The second palette that I bought in March was the Too Faced Natural Lust palette. So this is another one I really didn't get that much use out of, but when I purchased it at the time, I was thinking, you know, it's a neutral palette, there's so many different colors in here to work with, I would totally use this. And for some reason I used it a couple times and just really wasn't crazy about the formula. And come to find out, I really do prefer the Too Faced formula that's in the tin packaging versus these. For some reason it's just a lot better, a lot easier to work with, and more blendable. This one reminded me a lot of like those holiday releases that they come out with every so often. So while the formula wasn't terrible, it just wasn't my favorite. So I think that's most of the reason why I didn't use this that much. Another palette I bought in March, so this is the third one now, is the Natasha Denona Biba palette. So when this one first came out, I was so excited about it because these colors are beautiful. I knew I was going to get a ton of use out of it, and I really did for a while. The only downside to this palette is that it has some of those cream to powder shades in it that kind of dry up over time and they're really hard to work with. There's actually a few of them and they develop hard pan. There's this black here. This is another one in the middle, and then one of these greens I think is one of them. I think it's this one here. So that was really disappointing for me because this is such an expensive palette. It's over $100. It actually should have counted for 2 palettes, honestly. But just to have a few shades in here that aren't really usable for me was a bummer. Not to mention the fact that only a short time later, Alter Ego came out with an exact dupe of this palette, which I kind of felt like the formula on that one blended a little bit better. And even though it also has these cream to powder shades that don't really function that well, it was so much cheaper that I don't necessarily mind in that palette as much as I do with this one. So I definitely regret buying this one. It's just that, you know, hindsight is 2020. I had no idea that a dupe was going to be coming out for it so soon. Plus I did want to review it on my channel, but at this point it is something that just kind of sits around and doesn't get a lot of use, unfortunately. All right, so then moving on to April, I bought 2 high-end palettes in April. The first one was the Marc Jacobs Stiletto palette, and this one I actually really enjoy a lot. It's a beautiful, like, cool tone palette with those grays and taupey shades in it. It's absolutely gorgeous, so I don't regret buying this one at all because I got a ton of use out of it. And this shimmer shade right here, which is kind of like a silvery lavender, is one of the most beautiful shimmer shades. I don't know if it's going to focus on it, but it is the most beautiful color. Like, look at how stunning that is for a lid shade. So when I wanted kind of like more of that gray, taupey, kind of smoky look, I definitely reach for this one quite often. And I also just like how small it is. It's slim and compact, easy to travel with. I'm not quite sure if this was a limited edition or if it's still out there, but if it is, I'll link it down below, because if you love those grays and taupes, I think you'll really enjoy this one. The formula is good too. And then the second palette that I bought in April was this Stila After Hours palette. This one, admittedly, I haven't gotten a lot of use out of, but I do think the formula is really nice on it. But this is like one of those palettes where I was in store and I swatched it and I was just like, it was an immediate knee-jerk reaction, like I had to have it, because it's just really beautiful neutrals, but you also have this gorgeous green up here, and then this kind of plummy berry shimmer is also beautiful. So I definitely want to play with this one more. I can't say if it's a regret or not yet, because I really only used it once. I swatched it in a Sunday haul, and then I used it on my eyes once, and then I put it down in my beauty room, and then it got things piled on top of it, and I completely forgot I even had it. So once I was cleaning up towards the end of the year, I came across it and I was like, oh my gosh, I forgot I had this palette. So I'll have to keep you guys updated on whether or not I like this, but I did think the formula seemed really promising. The colors are beautiful too. So then when it comes to May, I actually did not buy a high-end palette in May, so that sort of cancels out one of the two that I bought in April, because I can kind of carry one of those over to May. So far we're exactly on track, exactly where I wanted to be. And then in June, I actually bought two palettes again in June. The first one was the Natasha Denona Sunrise palette, and this is another one that I kind of regret buying just because there was a dupe that came out from Alter Ego. So now I have two identical palettes. One of them is a lot cheaper than the other, but at least this wasn't one of her $129 palettes. It was $65. Not that that's inexpensive, but for Natasha Denona, it was a little bit more on the reasonable side. It's just that she made the pan sizes smaller, and that was something I was totally okay with. But this was definitely a YouTube purchase. There was a lot of hype around this palette, especially since it was at a more affordable price point. So I definitely wanted to do a review of it for you guys, but these shades are ones that I have in my collection so many times over. Even her original Sunset palette is very, very similar to this. This one just has a couple of kind of additional colors. It has the purples in it and stuff, but these are not, again, colors that I normally reach for on an everyday basis. So buying this one was kind of a regret. And then the second palette that I bought in June was this Dominique Rustic Glam palette. This palette is beautiful. I remember doing a video on this one as well over the summer, and I really enjoyed it. Unfortunately though, as I used it more and more, some of the shades kind of didn't develop hard pan necessarily. Well, this one actually did, but as I used it more and more, I did find a lot of the shades in here to be kind of tricky to work with, especially this green, which is one of my favorite shades in the palette, but it's just so hard to blend. And I mainly had that trouble with a lot of the mattes in this palette, especially the cooler toned ones. I felt like the warmer ones, like this orange and the brown, were really nice and kind of blended easily, but then these up here were a little bit more tricky to work with. So the formula on this one was not my favorite, but I did really like the unique colors that were in here, and they weren't like super bright colors. They were a little bit more on the subtle side, which I really liked about it. So this is another one I'll keep around, and I'll definitely use it because there's some colors in here that I don't have in my collection, but it's honestly not one that I reach for all that often. So that was June. I got two palettes in June. In July, I didn't get anything. So again, I'm still on track because I could kind of carry one of these over into July. So then in August, I bought two palettes again, high end. The first one is the Nude Spectrum palette from Zoeva. This one was definitely one of my favorite palette purchases of the year. A lot of you guys are probably going to look at this and say it looks really boring, but when it comes to neutral eyeshadows, there's such a nice variety in here. There's cool tones, there's warm tones. The formula is amazing, like most of Zoeva's palettes. I was so happy to see them come to Ulta because this was a palette that I've been wanting for a while, but I just really didn't feel like ordering it all the way from Germany. So when Zoeva hit the Ulta website over the summer, this was the first thing that I wanted to try out, and I definitely don't regret it. I really enjoy this palette, and I've used it a ton. And then the second palette that I bought in August was the Norvina Volume 1. Now this one is definitely a regret. I've mentioned that in a few videos already, but this was something that I bought for YouTube and also just for my own curiosity because it was kind of like an Anastasia spin-off brand, and I wanted to see what the formula was like. But I really, like, this color story really didn't speak to me. I didn't feel like I would use it all that often. And then once I actually did get a chance to try it, I just felt like it was a little bit more difficult to use. It's very pigmented, and I usually like a more soft powdery shadow that can blend a little bit easier, and I just felt like this was a little bit too much work for me. Again, it just kind of comes down to personal preference, but this was definitely a YouTube purchase more than anything else. I don't think I would have purchased this if I didn't have a YouTube channel, because the color range just doesn't speak to me at all. So looking back on August, I really should have only purchased this one and not this one, because this is the one that put me over my count for the year so far, and I wasn't able to carry any of these over into September, because in September I also bought 2 high-end palettes again. So the first one was definitely not one that I regret, and that's the Urban Decay Naked Honey palette. I'm actually wearing this one on my eyes today, and there goes the brush again. This one was one of my favorite purchases again of the year, if not my favorite, because the color story in here is, again, it's neutral. It's something that I gravitate towards, but these are neutrals that I didn't previously have in my collection, because they're warm, but they're more like yellowy warm versus the typical orange and red warms that we have so many of. So this was just something really unique and different, and something that I didn't have. So this is a palette that I do use pretty frequently. I also really love the formula of this one a lot. And then the second one that I bought in September was the Anastasia Jackie Aina palette. And this one, the formula is fantastic, like most of them are. I really enjoyed that. The only reason that I haven't used this one as much as I thought I was going to, because every time I picked it up to use it, I just felt like the color story overall was kind of a little bit too deep for my skin tone. And there's really only one shade that I can use for a transition, which is this one right here. And I don't even know that I would call this necessarily a transition shade. It was more of a crease shade, because I would have to just take this and then kind of blend it carefully up towards my brow bone. But normally when I'm using a transition, I want it to be just like 1 or 2 shades darker than my skin tone, so that I can blend out my crease color a little bit and prevent the harsh edges. And with this being like the lightest matte neutral shade in the palette that I could use, I don't know, I just really didn't reach for it all that often. Even though I think the colors are beautiful, I thought the formula was great, I just feel like it's not necessarily like the palette for me. So I'm thinking I probably shouldn't have purchased this one. Oh wait, actually there was 3 palettes that I bought in September. I was thinking I got this in October, but looking back it was September as well. And that's the Too Faced Extra Spicy Gingerbread palette. This is another one that I absolutely loved. I did a video where I did a whole bunch of looks with it, and I just felt like this palette, like, you can't go wrong with it. The formula is fantastic. The colors all work together so beautifully, and it was one that I really wasn't interested in until I saw it in store, and I swatched a couple shades and I'm like, this is so much more beautiful in person than it was online. So it was kind of an impulse buy, but I'm definitely not sorry that I bought it, because I've used it so much. It was like the most perfect fall palette ever. All right, so now we're ending September 3 palettes ahead, because I bought the Norvina, which was an extra one in August, and then after I bought the Naked Honey in September, I also purchased the Jackie Aina and the Too Faced. So I'm 3 palettes over my limit so far. And then in October, I bought, and I'm counting this just because it was expensive, the Too Faced holiday set. I can't remember exactly what the set was called, but it had this big palette right here. It also had like a blush highlighter palette, and then it had like a lipstick. It was like, you know, one of those holiday sets, but it was over $50, and it did have a large palette in it. So that's why I'm going to count it in my high-end purchases. But this palette, I actually really loved the colors in here so much, but I kind of broke my own rule when I bought this, because I told myself I'm not going to buy any more of these holiday sets, and I haven't the last couple of years, because usually the quality isn't there, and then they're limited, so once they're gone I can't really talk about them on my channel again, which is kind of a waste. But I just love the colors in here so much, I figured even if I don't talk about it on my channel, I'll at least use it myself. But famous last words, I really didn't. So I kind of do regret buying this. I'm going to try to make as much use out of it as I possibly can, but it definitely was not a smart purchase. It was, again, an impulse when I saw it in store. Alright, so with the addition of the Too Faced set in October, that put me 4 palettes over my limit. The good news is I didn't buy anything in November as far as high-end palettes, so then I'm back down to 3 over my limit. So in December, I did buy 1 high-end palette, and that was the KKW Classic Blossom palette. And this one I just showed very recently in a Sunday haul in December. Again, I bought it because I love the neutrals. They're more kind of like those berry tone neutrals, which I really like a lot. I have used this palette like twice now, and I feel like the formula is okay, but it's not my favorite. I didn't feel like it's worth like a lot of hype or anything. I did like it better than Kylie's formula, so I'll give it that much. And I can even think of like some ColourPop palettes that have a very similar color story to this. I can't think of the names off the top of my head, but I'm picturing them. So when you can get like the same quality or better for a lot less, it just makes me feel like I probably shouldn't have spent the money on this. The only reason I did is because I wanted to try the brand, but now that I have, I'm not really in a rush to buy anything else from them. them. So all told, I didn't quite meet my goal of 1 high-end palette a month. I went over by 3, but at the same time, I'm still proud of myself because it was a lot less than I was buying in the past. And there were so many palettes that came out this year that I completely skipped, and I really tried hard to just not go there. So let me just quickly read you some of the ones that I passed on. When it comes to Anastasia, I did not buy the Carly Bible palette or the Alyssa Edwards. I also didn't get the other Norvina Pro Pigment 2 and 3 and then the little mini ones. So I skipped pretty much all of ABH's releases after the Jackie Aina palette. I also didn't buy any palettes from Tarte this year, and they had quite a few. They had like the Fall Feels, the High Tides and Good Vibes, the Winter Wonder Glam. There were a couple collab palettes that came out, but I just felt like once you have a couple of Tarte palettes, you have them all. And I'm not faulting them because I love neutral palettes as much as the next person, but I just was trying to rein it in a little bit because I don't want to keep repeating shades that I already have. I also didn't buy the Lorac Luxe Diamond palette. That was another one that I was really like interested in, but held back. The Buxom Boss Babe palettes that came out, there was like one that was rosy toned and one that was a little bit warmer, I think. Those looked really good and I was intrigued, but I didn't buy those either. I didn't get any of the Kylie releases that came out. She always comes out with a ton of palettes throughout the year. Also, they had the Momager ones with the Kris Jenner one that everybody was talking about, and I actually really liked the color story of that one, but then I heard the formula wasn't great, so I just skipped that one. NARS came out with 2 palettes, Ignited and Inferno. I didn't get either one of those, even though I do really like their formula. I didn't get the Naked Reloaded palette from Urban Decay. Also, the Jouer Tan Lines palette, that was one I had it in my Sephora cart. I was going to buy it. I'm glad I didn't though, because a lot of people were saying again that the formula wasn't that great on it, but that was one that I really like. I almost purchased. The Huda Beauty Neon Obsessions, just because I'm not really into neon palettes that much, I didn't buy those. Busy Art had come out with a few different palettes on the Sephora website that I was really intrigued by. They had the Warm and Rosy and Dark Edit palettes. Those I remember seeing, I think Emily Noel talking about them. They looked really pretty, but I totally passed on those. Also, Lunar Beauty had come out with a few. There was the Strawberry Dream and the Moonspell palette, and a lot of you guys were actually asking me to do a review on those, but I don't know, I felt like, you know, I had already spent too much and I didn't want to go crazy, but I may still review those in the new year if it's something you guys would be interested in. Violet Voss came out with a bunch of new palettes this year. She had Coral Crush, Bright Vibes, the Sugar palette, Best Life 2, that little Oh Snap palette that was so cute, although I wasn't really counting mini palettes in this. So I didn't buy any of Violet Voss's palettes, even though I have a bunch of hers. And then the Natasha Denona Metropolis palette. That was one, I saw it come out. I was like, I really, really want this. But then when I went and actually swatched it in store at Sephora, I just felt like it was a little bit too dark for me overall. I know it was a kind of fall winter palette, but I just didn't think I was going to get a whole lot of use out of it. So I skipped that one. I also didn't buy the Dominique Celestial Storm palette, although I did get a little mini version of it in my BoxyCharm. But you know, that's enough for me. So yeah, I mean, those are just kind of some of the highlights of things that I passed on that came out this year. There were plenty more, I think, that were launched, but those were just the ones I could think of off the top of my head. So I think I did a pretty good job at reining things in. And for this coming year, I definitely want to do the same with drugstore palettes. I don't want to necessarily limit myself to 1 palette per month, just because I am still running a YouTube channel, a review channel at that. So I want to make sure that I'm getting reviews out there for you guys. But at the same time, you know, if a collection comes out, let's say, I know sometimes Makeup Revolution comes out with like a whole series of palettes, like the Forever Flawless ones, or, you know, BH Cosmetics is constantly cranking out new palettes. Like, I'm just gonna try to buy like one instead of buying them all, and just really focus on the one that I really think that I would use the most, and then I'll be able to at least let you guys know about the formula. But I don't necessarily need to be buying palettes just so I can show swatches and then never use it again. I just really think it's wasteful, and to be honest with you, I don't even have room for new palettes right now. So probably next week I'm going to start going through and decluttering. So if you guys would like to see something like that and just do an updated kind of eyeshadow palette collection slash declutter, so as I'm going through it, I'll just start taking palettes out and getting rid of them. I know I tried to do an updated eyeshadow palette video last February. I did part 1, but then I never got to part 2. So things have just been building up and now it's out of control. I have no more storage space. So this definitely has to happen. I don't think I'm going to be able to do it all in one video, because it's going to be really long, but I'm going to try to maybe just do like a little bit every day or something. So if that's something you guys would like, I'm going to do it regardless, but if you want to actually see it and I'll film it for you guys, I will. Otherwise, I'll just do it behind the scenes and not film it, but I definitely want to get your opinion on whether you would watch it or not. So anyway, guys, that's all I have for this video, and I think just to sum it up, if I could only choose 3 palettes that I bought this year, this is really easy actually. The 3 that I don't regret buying the most are the Urban Decay Naked Honey, the Zoeva Nude Spectrum, and then the Gingerbread Extra Spicy. These 3 palettes, I think if I had just gotten these 3 and skipped all the rest, I would have been totally happy. The Marc Jacobs Stiletto palette I really like too, but not as much as I like these 3. So these are definitely my top 3 picks of 2019 that I purchased. So anyway, I'd love to hear from you guys down in the comments below. What palettes did you skip this year, and what were your favorite palette purchases of 2019? I always love hearing your thoughts. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please don't forget to hit that subscribe button before you go, and I will see you in my next video. Bye guys!